Alright, ladies and gentlemen, grab you some coffee or your preferred beverage, buckle your seatbelts, and let's have a little talk. So, as the title implies, gonna have a little coffee chat, but this one's gonna be a 2-for-1 special. I'm gonna cover two different things here. That Invader Bacon Bourbon, always good. Oh, and I'm spilling it. Mercy me, that's a crime. All over my tablecloth. Look at there. Anyway, got a couple of things I'm going to talk about. We're going to cover two of them in this one video. So, it might be a little long. I don't care. It's going to take as long as it takes for me to say what I want to say. Because, you know, my channel and all. If you don't want to just hear a discussion, then click off now. No worries. That's fine. Might not be your cup of tea. Two things we're going to cover. And they both, in some ways, are connected. So, the first one that we're going to cover, apparently, in a couple of videos, I have given some folks just darn near heart failure because I've showed a couple of different rifles. My older one here being one that, as you can see, I have committed a just absolutely horrendous, egregious error. I bridged the optic. What does that mean? Well, as you can see on this mount, this solid piece of aluminum mount, the front lug is on the first lug of the handguard. The rear lug is on the receiver. So it's covering that connection point between the handguard and the receiver. For record, that's a Midwest Industries SLH handguard and a American Defense Manufacturing mount. On my recent 16-inch XBIL Arms build with the XBIL Arms handguard and the same American Defense mount, I did the same thing. Now, first off, why did I do it? Well, I did it because to get the eye relief where I want it to be at for the scope, that's where I had to put it at. I fit the scope to me. I do not fit myself to the gun. I shoot my guns a specific way, and I want to be able to pick up every one of them and shoot them the exact same way. That way, no matter which gun I pick up and shoot, my cheek placement, stock placement, grip, everything's always the same regardless of the gun. Where I shoot at, to do that, I had to move it to that location to get the proper eye relief for the scope. That's why I did it. Now, some folks find this to be an absolute, unforgivably egregious error in their opinion. Because hypothetically, you could take a hit to the handguard and cause it to shift, which is going to affect your point of aim, point of impact. Well, there's a couple of problems with that. First off, that primarily comes, not completely, but primarily comes from back in the day when we didn't have solid one-piece scope mounts. Back in the olden days, when such things first started becoming available, most folks started out using the Arms throw-lever mounts, and all you had, even in other brands other than Arms, was separate rings, right? They weren't connected in one solid piece. Additionally, the free float handguards that were coming out years ago weren't nearly as secure and stable as more recent ones are. So what would happen is, if you put one ring on the handguard and one ring on the receiver, those two rings are not connected by anything other than the scope. Any rotation or movement in that handguard could affect the scope in going one way or the other, even ever so minutely, which would change your zero and your point of aim, point of impact. The problem is that's carried over into the modern day, and everybody still has that thought. Now, if you're going to shoot at Camp Perry in competition, where the winner is usually decided by millimeters at 1,000 yards, or whatever distance they're shooting at, then yeah, there's certain things you want to do to eliminate as many micro variables as possible. But anybody that's watching this channel knows that the context, there's that word again, that I'm doing all this stuff is strictly from a fighting and that sort of use. These are not 1,000-yard precision rifles. They're not even 500-yard precision rifles. They are, whatever the distance may be, minute of man rifles. Also, I want to examine a couple of things. So, well, we'll even use this one because this is one of the ones that people have the most problem with. On this handguard, you see those big chunks of aluminum right there that go around the receiver? Those are anti-rotational points. This handguard cannot rotate because those chunks of aluminum are on the receiver. Additionally, I could take the handguard completely off and clamp this mount onto this receiver with the front end hanging over into bare space, and it'll still shoot accurately. You know how I know? Because I've done it. This one-piece base clamping that handguard in with that receiver, this solid chunk of aluminum does not flex. It does not rotate. It does not move. It will literally hold that handguard right there in place without these big chunks of aluminum on the side and the anti-rotational device. Add those two together, this handguard is not rotating at all. Nada. Or what if you drop it and it takes a big enough hit? Do you guys really understand the amount of pressure and energy it would take with these two things combined to affect the point of aim, point of impact on that scope? Let me put it in simple terms for you. If this gun takes enough of a hit to overcome this and change your point of aim, point of impact, I can 99% guarantee you your point of aim, point of impact accuracy is going to be the least of your worries. You have got a whole lot of other problems going on at that point. Now, these same folks that have a problem with this setup, oddly enough, don't have a problem putting either a backup or oftentimes primary iron sight out here on the end of the handguard, where it actually does have a little bit of up and down flex. But that's not a problem. This is a problem. That's not a problem. Now, if you follow in that logic, then, well, I think you need to go back and take high school level physics again. Because there's one other thing that all these same folks will, without question, slap onto the end of this handguard, closer to the end where the flex is at, and not up here around the barrel nut and receiver where it's all rigid and tight and unmovable. And that would be things like a visible and or IR laser beam that they are relying on as a sighting device for low light use. Out here where there is some movement. So this and a laser are not a problem, but this is a problem. Do y'all see where I'm getting with this? Come on, guys. Use your brains to get into the modern age, okay? I have been using this particular gun, as I mentioned before, for years. It's been through many classes. It's been dropped. It's been knocked over. It's been kicked. It's been dragged through the woods. It's been beat around. It still shoots the same today as it did the day I zeroed it. Not a problem with it. At least not that I'm worried about. Now, I'm not telling you what to do. You do you. If you don't like that, don't do it. Set things up how you want to. Just before you go telling other people that might have been doing it for a long time that they don't know what they're doing or they're wrong, go check it and find out for yourself. You might be surprised. Some of us have been doing this a long time. Some folks have been doing it a lot longer than me. A lot longer than me. And I think part of the problem is this leads me into the second part. So that's your bridging part. Now, this requires another sip. Let's talk about chasing MOAs, minutes of angle. I think some of the same folks that have a problem with the bridging are also guilty of this. So many people get wrapped around the axle about wanting the most accurate rifle possible. It's got to be a half MOA. It's got to be 3/4 MOA, whatever. Which is all great. Accurate rifles are awesome. But what happens is that I see a lot of times they get wrapped around the axle chasing those minutes of angle. Changing barrels, changing handguards, changing optics, changing ammo, changing triggers. That's a huge one. Changing all these different things. They're chasing minutes of angle, chasing minutes of angle. It's got to be whoosh, surgical. When the vast majority of them, if they're honest, again, context being real world fighting, are not half minute angle shooters. In fact, most folks, even a couple of folks that I've talked to about this very subject that are far better marksmen than me, will even admit that in a gunfight, when there's bullets flying at you and you're not on a manicured one-way range, a lot of people will be lucky to be a 6 minute of angle shooter. Sorry, but it's a thing. So your half MOA gun ain't going to do anything any better than what you are capable of. You are the primary limiting factor in that gun. My point with all this is there's nothing wrong with an accurate gun. You should want your gun to be accurate. But don't let yourself get caught up in the context of a fighting rifle. Again, we're not talking about competition or talking about all that stuff. We're talking about a fighting rifle. Don't let yourself get caught up chasing those minutes of angle. You'd be far better off spending all that same time and money, especially the time, instead of replacing all those parts on your gun, buy ammo, go take classes and train and then practice. Make yourself a better shooter before you get wrapped around the axle chasing those minutes of angle. Because again, repeating, it does not matter how accurate that gun is if you yourself are not physically, humanly capable of taking advantage of that accuracy. And in that, you've got to factor in that context again. That's something I will never stop talking about. And I know some of you think I'm harping about it, and I'm not. I'm just repeating it because every video might be the one and only one that somebody sees that I've mentioned it in. But the context is so vitally important. If you're talking about a fighting gun versus a competition gun, or whatever. A fighting gun, and I'm going to cause people some heart failure here, does not have to be a half MOA capable gun. It doesn't. For the longest time, I don't know what the current standard is, but for the longest time, the military acceptable standard for a rifle was 4 to 6 minute MOA. I think for the M1 Garand it was like 4 or 5 MOA. Because even they recognized that in combat, in a fight, you're not going to be a half MOA shooter. Now, if you're in a sniper role and you've got to do surgical shots, primarily from a completely concealed and hidden location without people shooting at you, then you're in a position to take advantage of a lot more accuracy capability in the weapon than you are in a general fighting rifle. Different uses, different, that's right, context. I think part of the problem with the bridging thing is guys are wrapped around the axle already about chasing minutes of angle, so then you throw in the bridging aspect and their minds just absolutely melt down because they think in their heads you're suddenly taking that rifle from a half MOA to 3/4 MOA or 1 MOA. Never mind that 1 MOA is still not what they're even going to be capable of in a real fight. It's more than usable as a fighting rifle. And again, I'm not saying you shouldn't want an accurate rifle. You should. What I'm saying is if you get a gun and with regular defensive ammo, like say ball ammo for a 5.56, if it'll shoot 2 MOA, before you start going and trying to make it a half MOA gun, take that same amount of money and time and put it into ammo training and practice, and you'll be far better off. That's my suggestion. So if you're just getting started in this, if you're a newer shooter, if you're newer into being an armed prepared citizen, and again the armed prepared citizen role is the context from which I'm talking about everything unless I ever note otherwise. Don't feel like, oh my God, my gun sucks because it'll only shoot 2 inches at 100 yards. It'll only shoot 2 inches at 50 yards. 2 inches at 50 yards is still a minute a man at 100. Easily, as long as you do your part. What are you trying to accomplish? Again, that context word comes in. What are you trying to accomplish with the gun? What's going to be the real world limitations of the gun, the ammo, of you the shooter? I'm just saying. So, from here on out, yes, I have a couple of guns that the optics are bridged on. No, it's not a problem. It's definitely not something I'm going to worry about. I don't need you to try to explain to me where I'm wrong because I have shot the guns for years, many rounds. I know what they do. I'm happy with it. I'm fine with it. I don't need you trying to convince me otherwise. Because a lot of times when some of these folks are trying to convince somebody else otherwise, what they're really doing is they're trying to convince themselves subtly by trying to convince somebody else. It's self-justification via projection. Go figure. So, if you don't want to bridge it, don't do it. But understand that in real-world application with a good modern free-float handguard and modern mounts, especially one-piece mounts, it's not an issue. It's really not. Especially when you've got the majority of the mount on the receiver of the gun itself. One lug onto the handguard is not going to make a usable difference in that gun. And if it takes a hit that damages it enough to affect it, the gun's going to be foobarred in other ways, I can just about promise you. Because that's not an easy thing to overcome and mess up. Real world use, guys. Again, I don't want to see any of you guys that are just getting started down this road to waste a lot of time and money on something that you would be better off spending that same time and money on, insofar as not trying to make the gun super accurate. Make yourself better. Make yourself a better accurate shooter. Make yourself a more competent, capable shooter. Make yourself a fighting capable shooter, i.e. take good classes where after you've got the basics of marksmanship and your fundamentals down, where you start actually getting into fighting, i.e. moving, utilizing cover, utilizing concealment, that sort of thing. You know, like you're going to do in a real fight, and not just always stationary on a nice manicured range with a stationary target and nice perfect stationary conditions for you, the shooter. Get into the fighting side of it if the armed prepared citizen role is what you're trying to accomplish. Does that make sense? All right, we've probably hammered that long enough. And again, no, I don't need anybody's validation because I validated it for myself, as already said, and I've got folks that are very close, valued friends with far more experience than myself who validate it. So I don't need convincing one way or the other. I'm set and solid. As you hear me say all the time, you do you. There's nothing wrong with you doing you. But just because you do you don't mean that I have to. I can do me. And still be okay. Promise you, it'll be okay. It'll be all right. That coffee's about gone. And y'all know what that means. When the coffee starts to run out, it's about time to start wrapping up. So, spend your money on mags, ammo, training. Then spend your money on practicing what you learned in training. Wash, rinse, repeat as much as you can. Hope somebody finds it useful, helpful. Hope it answers some questions for some folks. I'll go ahead and say it. If you're planning on putting a paragraph in the comments telling me why I'm wrong, you're going to be wasting your time. Okay? Don't do it. That's the caveat. Don't do it. If you don't like it, that's fine. Nobody says you got to like it. But just don't put a paragraph down there about why you want to try to convince me that I'm wrong. Because I'm not asking for your opinion. And I specifically put that at the end of the video because I want to see how many people actually make it all the way to the end of the video. Because not everybody's got that good of an attention span. And that's okay. That's fine. We're all different. On a serious note, guys, practice and train as much as you can. The world is not getting any better. Events are steadily happening. You need to be as trained and practiced as you can be, to be as capable as you can be, to accurately protect yourself, your family, your friends, your loved ones, and just anybody that you care about protecting. And only you can do that. That's the bottom line. Only you can do that. So get yourself properly equipped up here with the knowledge and training and experience that you need to be able to do it. It's not always about the tool as much as it is the shooter, or the person behind the tool, rather. Take care, guys. Keep getting ready. I will catch you in another one.